Strangers in the dust, twin sons of Aridanine, sank low across the horizon, staining the sky with burnt orange and dusty gold. Long shadows stretched over the wheat fields, and the dry wind carried the scent of grain and old metal. A solitary farmhouse stood at the edge of the crop line, its walls worn by time, its solar panels tilted toward the dying light. The land was too quiet for a planet once meant to be the Terran Republic's breadbasket of the frontier. Elias Wren wiped the grease from his hands and stepped down from the back of his utility crawler. He'd spent most of the day repairing a busted filtration unit and patching up a leak in the southern pipeline. The work was endless. The isolation didn't bother him anymore. After what he'd seen during the final days of the War of Scars, loneliness had become something like peace. He was halfway to the front gate, thinking about heating up Russian stew and maybe pouring a glass of old Martian whiskey, when he heard the sound. 3 knocks, soft, measured, almost like someone didn't want to be heard. His hand instinctively reached for the plasma wrench hanging at his side. Not a weapon, but solid enough if needed. Strangers rarely came this far out. Nothing on Aridanine came without cost, and usually not without trouble. Elias walked to the gate and peered through the rusted bars. Standing just beyond was a tall, cloaked figure. The long travel wrap was coated in dust, frayed at the edges. Beneath it, he could see faint glimmers, silver streaks across violet skin. Not human. Her eyes, golden and luminescent, locked onto his. Two children stood beside her. Smaller, fragile, their legs thin as twigs. Their hands clutched at her garments like lifelines. One of them swayed where he stood, barely able to remain upright. The woman lowered her hood. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I mean no harm. I don't come to steal or spy." Elias said nothing. He was already scanning the horizon. There were no patrol ships, no dust tracks, no sign of a raiding party. Just wind. "I'll work your fields," she continued, a tremble in her voice. "I'll clean your tools, fix your fences. Just feed my children, please." Elias looked again at the kids. There was nothing fake about their hunger. He could see their bones through their skin, eyes too large for their faces. One had a cough that rattled with each breath. He opened the gate. "Come in," he said. "I've got soup on the stove." The woman hesitated, then stepped inside, careful, eyes scanning every corner like a soldier entering enemy ground. The children followed, dragging their feet. But when they passed through the gate, they visibly relaxed. Just a little, inside. The farmhouse was basic. One main room, a kitchen unit, a small firebox burning slow. Elias lit a dim lantern and poured water into a pot, then added dried vegetables and a protein cube. It wasn't much, but it would warm them. The children sat on the floor, cross-legged, barely making a sound. Their eyes tracked every movement he made in the kitchen. Elias handed the first bowl to the smaller one. The boy's hands shook so badly he almost dropped it. The second bowl went to the older child. Both began to eat fast, shoveling the hot broth into their mouths with bare fingers, as if afraid it would be taken away. Elias placed the third bowl in front of the mother. She didn't move. "You not hungry?" "I'll eat after. I finished the work," she said, eyes lowered. "There is no work tonight, just soup." Still she didn't touch the bowl. Elias sat down across from her and slid the bowl closer. "Soup's better hot." She looked at him, studying his face for danger, for traps, for deception. Then, slowly, she picked up the spoon and took a small bite. Her eyes fluttered closed for half a second. The warmth surprised her. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. Elias nodded once. "What's your name?" She paused, then said. "Kellen," he repeated it. Not perfectly, but close. She blinked. "You said it right. I try to respect names," he said, especially when someone speaks with honesty. After they finished eating, Elias unrolled some old sleeping blankets by the fire. The children laid down without protest, instantly curling together like pups in a den. Kellen sat near the wall, back straight, eyes sharp. Still watching, still guarding. You can sleep too, Elias said. I'm used to staying awake. Your kids are. Safe here. I've heard that before, she replied. He didn't argue. He simply sat in his chair and leaned back, arms crossed, eyes half closed. Then don't take my word for it. Watch, you'll see. The fire crackled. Time passed. Elias eventually dozed off. When he woke an hour later, he saw Kellen still, sitting upright, but her eyes were closed now, her breathing soft. Her hands still rested close to the floor, just inches from her children. As if even in sleep, she refused to let go. Morning crept into the sky with pale purple light. Elias was already outside feeding the chickens when he heard the door creak open. Kellen stepped out, quiet and alert. Her hands were smudged with cleaning paste. Behind her, he saw the floor had been scrubbed, the bowls cleaned, the fire rekindled. I told you to rest, he said. I said I would work. He couldn't help but smile. You keep your word, I keep what I can. It's all I have, he nodded. You ever made bread? She shook her head. Then today's a good day to learn. The bread of strangish scent of flatbread filled the farmhouse, warm and earthy, curling through the air like a forgotten memory. The dough sizzled gently on the iron plates as Kellen watched Elias flip it with a practiced hand. She stood beside him, her hands folded, eyes studying every movement like it was a lesson in survival. In many ways, it was. The children still slept near the fire, small bundles of cloth and quiet breath. Their cheeks looked a little fuller than the night before, and their hands no longer clutched at each other in fear. The younger one twitched slightly in his sleep, but it wasn't the jerking of nightmares. It looked almost like dreaming. Elias handed Kellen a lump of dough. Your turn. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed it onto the floured surface. She flattened it awkwardly, edges uneven, the center too thick. She frowned but kept going. He didn't correct her. He simply watched. You were a soldier, she said quietly as she worked. Elias raised an eyebrow. That obvious. You carry yourself like one, she said. And you haven't asked me why I'm here. Soldiers usually wait for answers to come, rather than chase them. He didn't respond at first. The silence between them stretched, but didn't feel empty. I stopped chasing things a long time ago, Elias finally said. Now I grow food, fix machines, let ghosts pass through. Kellen flipped her bread. It was burnt on one side, raw, on the other. Still, Elias didn't criticize. She handed it to him. Almost ashamed, he took a bite, chewed, and nodded. Edible. We'll call that progress. She gave the faintest smile. It vanished quickly, but not before he noticed. The children stirred. Kellen moved quickly, kneeling beside them and brushing their hair back with her fingers. The older child sat up and rubbed his eyes, then blinked at the smell of breakfast. The younger followed, slower, sleep still clinging to his limbs. When Kellen handed them pieces of warm bread, they took them with careful hands. They didn't eat like wild things this time. They sat together, back against the wall, and chewed quietly. Elias poured a cup of weak calf for Kellen and another for himself. They sat at the table as the light of the twin suns filled the small house with pale gold. You got anywhere to go? He asked finally. Kellen didn't answer right away. No. You running from something? Always. She sighed, eyes fixed on the window. He nodded. Well, I won't ask who or why. But you and the kids, you can stay a few days. How about get strong again? Kellen's eyes narrowed. And then, whatever you want. I won't hold you. She stared at him, as if trying to find the hidden price. When she found none, she exhaled slowly. I won't stay longer than needed. Elias didn't argue. That day, they worked in the backfield. The harvester had jammed again, and Elias needed someone to help him dislodge the gear housing. Kellen rolled up her sleeves without a word and crawled halfway into the machine. Grease smeared her face and arms, her alien skin shimmered under the grime, but her movements were precise, controlled, not delicate, but efficient. This was not someone who had lived a soft life. While she worked, Elias kept an eye on the kids. They played quietly near the tool shed, stacking dry seed pods and pretending they were bricks. The older one drew patterns in the dirt with a stick. The younger built small towers and knocked them down with a laugh. They don't speak much, Elias said as Kellen slid out from beneath the machine. They don't need to, she replied, wiping her hands. They've had enough words. By midday, the machine was fixed, and the two of them shared water under the shade of the grain tower. Kellen drank with both hands, then offered the bottle back. Elias noticed she still kept her body between him and the children, always protecting, always watching. You don't rest much, he said. I rested once, she answered. It cost me everything. He didn't pry. That evening, they shared a meal of vegetable stew and grain sticks. The children helped clean up afterward. Kellen showed them how to dry the bowls, how to fold the rag properly. She didn't speak like a mother, but she moved like one, gentle hands, quiet instructions, watch flies. After the sun dipped behind the hills, Elias stepped outside and sat on the porch. The wind stirred the wheat fields, making them ripple like liquid bronze. Stars began to appear one by one, sharp and cold in the arid sky. Kellen joined him after a while. She didn't sit. She stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed. You said you stopped chasing things, she said. But you're still watching the horizon. Elias smirked. Old habits. Kellen tilted her head. Or old hopes. He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a small packet dried fruit, wrapped in cloth. For the kids, later, he said. Kellen took it gently. You give too much for nothing. Elias looked at her. You think this is nothing? Her throat tightened. She looked away, toward the stars. I've been places where kindness was a weapon, she whispered, where food came with chains, where words became traps. Then this must be confusing, he said. It is. They stood in silence again. The kind of silence that wasn't empty, but full of things left unsaid. Before going back inside, Kellen turned to him. Her voice was quiet. I don't know what this place is, or what you are. But thank you, Elias nodded, then looked up at the stars. Let's see what tomorrow brings, inside. The children were already asleep, curled together under the blankets. Kellen sat near them, one hand resting gently on the younger one's back. For the first time since arriving, her body relaxed, even if her eyes remained open a little longer. Outside, the wind blew through the fields like a whispered promise. Tomorrow would come, and with it, something new. Fire beneath the silent south wind blew harder the next morning, stirring the dry grain fields into restless waves. Dust swept across the horizon like smoke, casting a golden haze over everything. Elias stood outside the farmhouse, tightening with the seals on the water tanks. Storms on Aridonine were rare, but when they came, they didn't ask for permission. They stripped paint from steel and toppled weak roofs. Everything had to be secured. Kellen was already up, standing barefoot, in the red soil, her long dark cloak tied tight at the waist. She held a rusted rake in one hand, ready to clear the tool yard of loose debris before the wind got worse. She hadn't waited to be told. She never did. It was as if every moment of stillness frightened her more than physical pain. Elias approached her with a bundle of warm gloves. These'll keep your fingers in one piece. She took them without a word. He noticed her hands were already blistered, the alien silver beneath her skin bruised and scraped. She wore no expression, but he could see the fatigue hanging from her shoulders, like weight she couldn't put down. Storm will hit by evening, Elias said. We need to finish the west fence before that. I'll handle the fence, Kellen replied. You stay with the children. Elias hesitated. You sure? Kellen met his eyes. They need someone to smile at them. I don't do that very well. He almost smiled himself. Neither do I. She turned away without responding. already walking toward the backfield, with a coil of wire and a hammer in hand. The wind pushed against her like a test, but she didn't slow down. Elias watched her go, then looked back at the house. The children had just woken up and were staring out through the dusty window. He walked inside, greeted them with a nod, and knelt down. Ever built a storm lantern? The older one tilted his head. Elias reached into a box and pulled out an old glass cylinder, a wick, and a bottle of recycled oil. "Let's build something bright," he said. The children didn't speak, but they gathered around. Their hands were small but steady, with patience. He showed them how to clean the glass, set the wick, and fill the oil chamber. The younger one giggled softly when Elias lit the flame, and the warm glow spread across the table. Kellen returned. Before midday, sweat dripping from her neck, dirt smudging her jaw. The fence was patched, the storm shutters were bolted down. She dropped her tools outside and entered quietly. Elias handed her a cup of water, and she drank it in silence. "Your kids made light," he said, gesturing to the flickering lantern. Kellen looked at it. A strange emotion flickered across her face, something like pride, but buried under exhaustion. "They haven't smiled like that in weeks," she whispered. "You gave them the chance," Elias replied. She said nothing, but sat beside the fire, stretching her legs out slowly like someone who'd forgotten how to rest. The storm hit just after dusk. It wasn't violent at first. The wind moaned low and steady, crawling through cracks and corners. The shutters rattled, dust slammed against the walls like thrown fists. The fire flickered in its stone pit, and the lantern's glow danced over the walls. Kellen sat near the window, eyes locked on the blackness outside. She hadn't touched her dinner. The children sat curled on the floor again, but they were calmer this time, safe, at least for now. Elias poured himself a cup of hot tea and pulled his coat tighter. "You ever been through a frontier storm before?" Kellen shook her head. "I've seen firestorms on mining moons. They eat people alive," he nodded. "These ones don't burn, but they'll strip flesh just the same if you're out in M." A loud bang echoed through the roof. The children jumped. Kellen moved instantly, shielding them with her body. Elias stood, grabbed a lantern, and stepped outside through the side hatch. The wind nearly knocked him over, but he managed to check the roof. A loose metal panel had come undone. He secured it quickly and returned, soaked in dust and sweat. Kellen stood near the fire, eyes narrowed. "You didn't have to go. I don't like broken things," he replied. She stared at him for a moment. "Neither do I." Later that night, the storm grew louder, howling like an ancient creature just beyond the walls. Inside, the fire burned low, and the children finally fell asleep. Kellen remained seated, arms crossed, her gaze never leaving the entrance. "You never really stop watching, do you?" Elias asked from his chair. Kellen didn't answer. "You sleep with your eyes open," he continued. "You clean before anyone asks. You fix fences without complaint. You act like the next blow is always coming." She turned toward him, the firelight casting shadows across her angular face. "Because it usually is," she said. "The moment you believe you're safe is the moment the knife slips in." Elias leaned forward. "But what if there is no knife here?" "There always is," Kellen whispered. "It just waits longer in kind places." He sat back, silent. The wind screamed outside. After a long pause, she spoke again. "You want the story, don't you? Only if you want to tell it." Kellen looked into the fire. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I was born in orbit, on a salvage ring near the rim. My people weren't citizens, not of any system. We were called the forgotten, bargain workers. Live cargo." She didn't blink as she spoke. Her voice was calm to calm. "My parents were sold before I could walk. I was raised by crewmen who thought silence was obedience. When I was 10, they branded me for inventory tracking. When I was 13, I cleaned out bodies from decompression leaks. When I was 15, I was sold." Elias didn't move. He let the fire speak between her words. "I ran twice, got caught both times. The third time, I made it to a transport station. I stowed away in a freight pod. Ended up on Oridar. Found the children in a holding cage, abandoned, hungry. I broke the lock. She finally turned to Elias, her eyes burned, but not with tears. They're not mine. But no one else wanted them. I didn't want them to disappear like I almost did. Elias met her gaze. You didn't save them because you had to. No, she said. I saved them because no one saved me. Silence returned, thick and heavy. The fire popped, wind howled, dust scraped the walls. Elias stood and poured another cup of tea, handed it to her. Then maybe this is where that changes. Kellen looked at the cup, then at him. I don't believe in kindness without cost. You'll learn, he said. One day at a time. And for a moment, just a second, Kellen looked at him not with suspicion, but with something close to hope. The storm howled on, but inside, a new fire had begun to burn. The weight of a promised storm passed in the early hours before dawn, leaving behind a shattered quiet. Dust blanketed the porch like snow, and shards of metal littered the edge of the field where wind had torn pieces from the old shed. One of the smaller solar panels lay cracked on its side, wire sparking weakly in the early morning gloom. Elias stood at the edge of his porch, arms crossed, staring out over the damage. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky was beginning to glow with soft lavender light. The air still smelled of static and sand. It would take days to clear the mess behind him. The door creaked open. Kellen stepped outside, her cloak pulled tight around her shoulders, the edges still holding the scent of smoke and dust. Her hair was pulled back now, wrapped with a simple string, and her eyes were sharper than ever. She scanned the horizon with practiced calm. You lost a panel, I saw. I can fix it. Elias didn't look at her. You don't need to. Kellen stepped down into the dirt and crouched near the broken equipment. She studied the wires, the metal hinges, the cracked glass. Her fingers moved quickly, gently, like someone touching the edge of a wound. Behind her, Elias sighed. You never stop, do you? She didn't answer right away. I rest when the work is done. He stepped down beside her. But the work's never done, then I never rest. The wind stirred around them, softer, now, less angry. Kellen found a small toolkit in the debris and began stripping the insulation from one of the wires. Elias watched her for a moment, then bent down and held the panel steady while she reconnected the lead. I've known soldiers like you, he said, after the war, always looking for something to fix, even when they were the ones broken. Kellen didn't stop working. I was never a soldier. No, Elias said. But you're fighting just the same. She looked up at him, her hands pausing. I fight, so they don't have to. The children were still asleep inside, their small forms barely rising. Under the blankets, Elias glanced at the farmhouse window, then back at her. You do all this for them. I do it, so they live long enough to choose who they want to be, Kellen replied. Not what the galaxy decides for them. They reattached the panel, and though the glass remained cracked, the display light blinked green again. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold Dot back inside. The air was warm with the scent of morning broth. Elias stirred the pot, while Kellen cleaned her hands at the sink. The children slowly woke up, stretching and yawning, their eyes still heavy, but no longer fearful. The younger one crawled into Kellen's lap as she sat down on the floor, wrapping her arms around him instinctively. She didn't speak, but the motion said everything. Elias knelt beside them, handing the boy a warm cup of soup. What's his name? Kellen hesitated. He doesn't have one. What about the other? He was called Unit 4. When I found him, she said, her voice bitter. I didn't know if giving them names would make it harder. If I failed. Elias blinked slowly. Names are the start of everything. It means they matter. Kellen's lips parted, just slightly. Then she looked down at the boy in her arms. His name is Rel, she whispered. The older one, Marrow. The children looked up at her. blinking in surprise. Then, as if they'd been waiting a long time to be named, they smiled. Elias nodded. Welcome to the world, Rel and Marrow. Later that day, they worked to clean the storm debris. Kellen lifted broken planks, realigned the outer fence, and resecured the grain storage top. Marrow helped Elias with the smaller tools, while Rel followed his mother like a shadow, carrying nails in a tin box. Around midday, a distant hum rolled through the sky. Low, mechanical. Elias froze, turning toward the noise. Kellen's hand snapped up like lightning, signaling for silence. She ran toward the back of the house, climbed the roof with frightening speed, and dropped flat. Elias followed, slower, older, less agile. When he reached the roof's edge, Kellen pointed westward, a transport craft. Military make. Dark grey, unmarked. It moved slowly, scanning the fields. Kellen's voice was tight. It's a hunter, here, Elias whispered. They're looking for escaped assets, she said. I've seen those ships before. Elias grabbed the old scope from a hidden box beneath the roof shingles. He peered through it, tracking the ship's path. Not Terran. Not League either. Private contract, Kellen said. That's worse. The ship banked, passed over the western ridge, and slowly faded from view. But neither of them moved. You think they're tracking you? Elias asked. I know they are, she replied. You said you ran. I did, you said. You saved those kids. I did. He lowered the scope. What else haven't you told me? Kellen didn't answer for a long moment. Then she spoke, voice tight and low. I wasn't just running. I took something. Elias waited. A data key. Locked inside one of the children. Genetic locked encryption. Hidden in their spinal chips. Why? Because it holds evidence. Proof of what they did to thousands of us. Elias sat back, stunned. You're not just running. You're exposing them. I didn't plan it, she said. I just saw the opportunity. I didn't think we'd survive this far. Elias looked down at the fields. The wind moved gently now, whispering secrets. Between stalks of grain. You're not safe here anymore, he said. I was never safe, Kellen replied. But they were. He looked back at her. Then we protect them, together. For the first time since they met, Kellen's eyes shimmered not with fear or exhaustion but with something raw, trust, hope, maybe even belief. She looked toward the setting sun, where the dust glowed red and orange, and whispered something in her native tongue. A prayer, maybe, a memory. Then she turned to Elias and said, If I die, keep them safe. No, he said. We survive together. That's the promise now. And in that moment, without ceremony or fanfare, a pact was made not between soldier and refugee, not between human and alien, but between two souls who had seen the worst of the universe and still chose to stand. The wind picked up again, but this time it carried something else. Strength. And the fire inside the farmhouse would not go out. Shadows on the horizon of days after the ship passed were restless. Even when the skies were calm and the tools hummed as they should, there was a sharpness in the air that never quite faded. The wheat still grew tall, the sun still rose and fell, but the world no longer felt like it belonged to them. It belonged to the fear they could not shake. Kellen walked the perimeter every morning before sunrise, boots quiet on the dust, eyes watching every movement on the hills. Her cloak flapped in the wind, and her fingers never strayed far from the knife hidden at her waist. The blade wasn't much rusted, dull, but it was better than nothing. And she had learned long ago that a sharp mind behind a dull knife could still kill. Elias didn't stop her. He just kept working the fields, fixing machines, feeding the children, keeping things moving. If he stopped to think too long, the weight of what she'd told him would settle in his chest like a stone. The data chip inside the boy, the child, whose name was now Marrow, was worth lives. Thousands, maybe more. It held proof of the trafficking, the experiments, the ownership contracts buried deep within corporate networks. That kind of truth didn't just ruin reputations, It broke systems. And it was inside a child who barely spoke. Kellen didn't speak of it again. But Elias could feel the tension growing like pressure in the air before lightning strikes. The next week passed without incident, but they all felt the shift. Maro and Rel, once too timid to step away from Kellen's side, now explored the edges of the farm. They played in the storage barn, chased dust lizards through the empty barrels, and built strange little structures out of scrap metal and sticks. Elias gave them old nails and strips of cloth, and Maro fashioned a crude flag one with a handprint in the center. Surrounded by a ring of stars, Kellen saw it one evening and froze. Elias noticed her breath catch, the way her eyes fixed on the symbol. "You recognize it?" he asked. Kellen knelt and ran her fingers across the cloth. "It's an old mark from the resistance camps," she whispered. "It means lost but not forgotten. Did you teach him that?" "No," she said. "He shouldn't know it. He wasn't born there." Elias glanced at the boy. Maro was crouched over a stack of polished stones, organizing them into careful patterns. "Then maybe," Elias said, "he carries more than a chip." Kellen said nothing, but she didn't let go of the cloth for a long time. That night, she didn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the fire, turning the cloth over in her hands, again and again. Her eyes stared into the flame, but her thoughts were somewhere far away. Elias sat down across from her. He poured her a cup of warm spiced milk and set it on the floor. "I know what you're thinking," he said. Kellen didn't look up. "You want to run again?" Her voice was hollow. "If they come here, you'll die. The children will be taken. Everything we've built will turn to ash." Elias shook his head. "If you run, you die alone. If they catch you, the children go with them. At least here, we have ground beneath us, walls, tools, a plan." Kellen finally looked up. "And what plan is that, farmer?" Elias leaned forward. "We make this place a signal, not a hiding spot." She stared. He went on. "There are others, colonies, traders, nomads, people who've seen the same cruelty. Some fought back, some still do. You've seen them. I've worked with them." "And what?" Kellen asked. "We call them with smoke signals. Hope they come running when the sky darkens." "We don't send smoke," Elias said. "We send the truth." He stood and walked to the corner of the room. From a small box buried under a panel in the floor, he pulled out a battered, dusty transmitter, military grade, old, but still functional. He set it on the table and tapped the screen. It flickered once, then lit up with a soft blue glow. "Comare still works," he said. "It's not strong, but it's clean." Kellen moved toward it slowly. She looked at the screen like it was a ghost. "Encrypted signal?" she asked. "Type beam," he replied. "Masked as meteor trail traffic." Kellen's eyes narrowed. "Who taught you that?" Elias looked at her. "Come. I didn't just farm wheat before this. For a long time. No one said anything. Then Kellen sat down and began typing. Her fingers moved fast, precise. Code scrolled across the display. Each line carried pieces of the past, fragments of pain, flashes of violence buried in corporate servers, and locked down by blood. "We don't send the chip," she said. "We send a message that we have it. And if something happens to us, it goes wide." Elias nodded. "You think anyone's listening?" Kellen's voice was steady. "If even one of them is, it's enough." Maro wandered in, rubbing his eyes. He saw the glowing screen and stepped beside his mother. She didn't hide it. She let him see the message. The lines of names, the evidence, the threat. He looked up at her, his tiny voice quiet. "Is that what they did to us?" Kellen reached out and touched his cheek gently. "No, that's what they wanted to do. But we're still here." Maro leaned into her hand. "Will they come again?" "Yes," she said. "But this time, we're not alone." Elias stepped outside before dawn, rifle slung across his shoulder. It hadn't been fired in years, but he cleaned it that night, checked every part. The soil under his boots felt different now, not like land to till, but like ground to defend. He looked out at the far ridge, where the sky was turning pale pink. Somewhere beyond that line, ships waited. He didn't know if help would come. But if it didn't, they would still stand. They were no longer hiding, they were ready. And the fire in the farmhouse was now more than warmth, it was a beacon.